The NPA is concerned about security. Former President Jacob Zuma has to be transported to court. Incarcerated, Zuma refuses to appear virtually for his hearing to have his arms deal trial thrown out. Let's speak to legal journalist Karyn Maughan. Karyn, thank you so much for joining us on this issue. Good to have you back. So welcome back to work. Zuma is still refusing to consent to this virtual hearing of his plea application. What reasons has he provided?
Well, Jacob Zuma remains adamant, both him and his lawyers, that having a virtual hearing of his so-called special plea application would amount to a violation of his fair trial rights. He gives a number of reasons through his lawyers in his submissions to Judge Karyn, which of course were filed yesterday, in which he says, amongst other things, that if there's an interpreter, for example, if he wants an interpreter, there may be an issue with him getting one in prison. A number of his supporters would not necessarily have access to a TV to be able to follow this case, either virtually or through a broadcast. He's saying that the unrest and fears around COVID that had led Judge Karyn in the beginning to consider a virtual hearing were no longer at play to the same extent, that the situation in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng has calmed down. And that really the best way to have this hearing was an in-person hearing where he would be able to consult with his lawyers more readily. He says he can't do that at the moment through in prison. And he's also raised the concern through his lawyers that if there is a virtual link, there is the risk of interception. So he has raised concerns about his potential interactions with his lawyers somehow then being monitored in a way that he believes would violate his rights.
Well, the NPA is pushing with this virtual hearing. What security concerns are they raising?
They specifically raised in their submissions to Judge Karyn, the kind of messaging that has gone out to Jacob Zuma's supporters to gather at court on the 10th, which is when this special plea argument is going to be heard. They've also raised concerns around COVID. They've said that even though we are now on level 3, the same concerns are in place. And there is absolutely no reason why, those participating in this hearing should put themselves at risk in a security level and on a COVID level for this particular case. They've also said that they've engaged Clement with law enforcement who've given the sort of semi-assurance that they will do their best to control any potential protest that may be linked to this court case on the 10th. But as Billy Downer states in submissions to Judge Karyn, of course the lead prosecutor, saying that there is no guarantee that there may not be some form of violence or protest, particularly in the wake of the unrest that followed the former president's imprisonment last month after he was found guilty of contempt of the Constitutional Court.
And Zuma's response to this issue of security, I see that through his lawyers he says, well, we're now on level 3 and the unrest has somehow subsided.
Well, remember, he was at pains through his lawyers in the submissions that were previously made last month to undermine any suggestion that he was somehow responsible for what had happened. His lawyers have said that, look, this unrest did occur subsequent to his imprisonment, but it cannot necessarily be whole-scale blamed on him. They've sought to undermine any suggestion that this court case next week, which, to which he wants to be brought from prison, will somehow be a political rallying point or a potential kickstarter to another wave of potentially economically devastating and fatal unrest and violence. So it's really going to be also about, we know that the Department of Correctional Services were asked to make submissions by Judge Karyn. We don't know if they have in fact done so. My information is that they have not. But it's really going to come down to the judge to make this very potentially politically fraught decision as to whether he overrides Jacob Zuma's concern that his fair trial rights will be violated and his refusal to consent to a virtual hearing and persists with that, or whether he runs the risk, as the NPA has suggested, that this court hearing could either be some form of COVID super spreader or it could, unleash a second wave of protest and potential unrest in KwaZulu-Natal, which is still reeling from the devastation of what happened last month.
All right, legal journalist Karyn Maughan, always appreciate your time on The Lead.